and you were going to unmute me. Because anyway, thank you for organizing this debate. I'm pleased to take part in it because I am a strong believer in the idea that we can discuss ethical issues in ways that are enlightening, that are reasonable, that are civil, and even on issues as polarizing as abortion has been in the United States. It's not just a matter of saying, this is my view, that's your view, we're going to have to fight it out politically. It is a matter where there are arguments to be put forward, to be weighed, and I hope that you will see that from tonight's discussion. Obviously, I think my arguments are stronger than my opponents, but that's for you to decide, but on the basis of the arguments. Secondly, Stephanie, I'm delighted to learn that you're pregnant. Congratulations. That gives a different flavor, I guess, to tonight's discussion. But I wish you all the best, of course, with that pregnancy. Now, I think that abortion is an interesting ethical issue to discuss. And I have to say that it's not a simple question to discuss. I think a lot of the discussion in the United States has been too simple because it's been based on the idea that it's just a matter of the woman's choice, that all you really have to say is, it's my body and therefore it's my choice. And people sometimes confuse the abortion issue with other issues where there really is nobody else involved. For example, decisions about whether your sexual partner should be somebody from your own sex or someone from a different sex doesn't harm anyone else. It's really, I think, a decision that is a victimless crime, or when it was a crime, it was a victimless crime. And so I agree with John Stuart Mill's statement that the state should generally not interfere with people when they don't harm others. But you can't resolve the abortion debate in that way, because the whole debate is about whether there is an other who is harmed by it. And so that's what we're talking about. And I think the moral status of the embryo and fetus is really the crucial issue. And you can't resolve this issue without discussing that. But discussing that actually does lead to some challenging conclusions, challenging for conventional views about the taking of human life. And you'll see that as we go through what I'm going to say. Now, Stephanie has been arguing largely in her discussion that the embryo from conception and the fetus is a human being. And many people think that that is the crucial issue in the abortion debate. And therefore, people are in favor of allowing abortion, of saying abortion is not immoral, argue that the embryo and fetus is not a human being. I don't take that line. I agree that from conception, or arguably some days after conception, I'll come to that in a moment, but basically from conception, there is a living member of the species Homo sapien. I don't think you can really dispute that. The dispute that I mentioned comes as to, in the first few days, it may not be an individual because it's possible for the embryo to divide and become identical twins or triplets or something like that. And interestingly, an Australian Roman Catholic theologian, Reverend Father Norman Ford, has suggested that perhaps you only have a human individual once the possibility of that division has passed, which would be about 14 days after conception. But that's not really relevant for a debate about abortion, because abortions occur later than 14 days after conception. So I grant that the entity that we're talking about, the entity that is killed, as Stephanie vividly described, in an abortion, is a living member of the species Homo sapien. When you use the term human being to describe a member of the species Homo sapien, that's technically perfectly correct common usage. I don't dispute that. But it does cover up different things that we might mean by the term human. So, for example, people will sometimes say, you know, what of somebody who did some terrible crime? That was an inhuman thing to do. Or, you know, he acted like an animal, which is actually pretty unfair to most non-human animals who don't act like that. But there's a sense in which we build certain other features into being a human. And I think that's where things come a little bit unstuck for the argument that is against abortion. It's true that abortion kills a living member of the species Homo sapien, But I don't think we should accept the view that every living member of the species Homo sapien has a right to life. If we do try to defend that view, we have to say, well, why would it be that just being a member of some species gives you a right to life? Why wouldn't every living member of the species Pan troglodytes have a right to life? Those are chimpanzees, by the way. What is supposed to be the difference? Now, of course, some religions think that only members of the species Homo sapien were made in the image of God or have immortal souls. But I'm assuming that we're putting aside those kinds of considerations now. So what would it be that gives a being a special right to life that, let's say, chimpanzees don't have? Or if you think chimpanzees do have, then most people, at least in our society, think that some animals don't. Anybody who's not a vegan is going to be thinking that some animals don't have a right to life, or at least it's okay to kill them in order to produce food. So the statement that Stephanie quoted from Bill and Melinda Gates, all lives have equal value, that she said she believes, actually, I take it she doesn't. She doesn't think that all lives have human life, have equal value. She thinks all lives of members of the species Homo sapien has equal value. And I also don't really think that that statement is true. It's a nice piece of rhetoric, but, and it's certainly, if we're talking about questions of famine and helping people in low-income countries to survive, I do think we should be assuming that all of their lives are of equal value. But when it comes down to it, I think there are differences in the value of different lives. And I think that they depend on capacities and characteristics and qualities that beings have. So I mark a two-stage difference. I think a being first gets moral status, moral standing, so that it's entitled to moral consideration when it's capable of feeling something, when it's capable of feeling pain, for example. Now, the developing embryo or fetus, according to the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, says that doesn't happen until the third trimester. So about the third trimester begins at 27 weeks. So we could say 27 weeks. If you want to be cautious, some people say, well, you shouldn't have an abortion after 20 weeks because maybe the fetus feels pain at that point. Once that happens, I do think that there is a moral question about abortion. I don't think abortions are necessarily wrong, but I think there's something about the entity that's killed that needs to be taken into account, and that is that it can feel pain and probably would feel pain if destroyed by the procedures that Stephanie vividly described. So that's morally significant. But there's a subsequent stage that humans normally develop to, where they are not just capable of feeling pain, but they are self-aware, they have a sense of themselves, and they begin to develop desires and hopes for the future. And that's certainly the case of all of us listening now. We are beings who are aware of ourselves, who are planning to do things. Obviously, you plan to listen to this event, and probably you have far more distant plans as well. Our moderator said that she's a rising junior at Harvard, but she's taken leave this year. She plans to go back to Harvard next year, hopefully when the COVID pandemic is over. And you probably all have plans what you're going to do when the pandemic is over, or what you're going to do when you graduate, and so on. But an embryo and a fetus doesn't have any such plans. Now, you'll point out, and if not, I'm sure Stephanie will point out, that nor does a newborn infant. And that's why I think there is a challenge to our views about abortion, because the view that birth makes a morally crucial distinction is difficult, given that sometimes birth occurs after 6 months of gestation with a premature birth, and sometimes it occurs, obviously, after 9 months. And it's difficult to see why the child born prematurely at 6 months should have a moral status higher than the fetus in the womb at 7 or 8 months. I think, in fact, that neither of them have full moral status. And that's why I have defended the right of parents in some circumstances where their infants are severely disabled to have active euthanasia of that child. Of course, that's not very different from what doctors already do in intensive care units, where they ask parents of those children if they would like to withdraw the respirator if the child needs a respirator to breathe. And if the parents agree, the doctors will withdraw the respirator and the child will die. And they know that that's what's going to happen. But they think that that's the best thing for the families and for the child because of the nature of the child's disabilities and the poor quality of life that the child will have. So that's why I think uh, developing a consistent view about abortion is actually more difficult than people think. It does have implications for how we think about newborn infants that many people find quite challenging. But I don't think we should run away from those implications. I think that's part of the nature of the abortion issue. So to draw this to a conclusion, I'm suggesting that although it's true that the embryo and fetus is a living individual human being, I don't accept the view that all living individual human beings have the same right to life. I think that we should, insofar as we talk about rights, we might think that the law should use birth as a dividing line because it's a clear and marked, easy line to make, and any other line is going to be more gradual and difficult to actually adjudicate, difficult to decide. So that's a possibility, but we're not now talking about what the law should be. We're talking about the morality of the acts. And I think in terms of the morality of the acts, it's not until sometime after birth that human beings have the full right to life that you and I have. And that makes a difference to the need for the justification that we need to end that life. Thanks very much.